Hi class, I wanted to put out a video reviewing the rubric for the first and final draft. So we'll be using the same rubric for your first and final drafts. So you will see over here on the left column the major areas that we'll be looking at, and then across the top the different levels of competency. And I grade each of these areas within this range. So you could receive 10 points, you could receive 17 points. Um, what I would like to do here is go over some of these major areas as well as talk about a couple other things related to the paper. Now, first of all, um, a question that a lot of people have, and you can find this answer in the paper expectations document in Module 6. It is on a rubric, it's just some bare bones expectations for the paper. One of those expectations is the page length needs to be between 8 and 10 pages of writing. So that means that your page length does not include your title page, your abstract, or your reference pages, or any pages that have figures or tables on them if you are using those. So please keep that in mind. It's 8 to 10 pages of writing, and I'll be very forward with you in saying that your paper your paper grade for your first draft and for your final draft will very much suffer if it is not at least 8 pages of writing. Now, 8 pages double spaced in Word is really not that much to ask. In fact, if you only do 8 pages, you're going to have to be writing pretty well in order to get all your points across. But you can create a very good paper in 8 pages of writing. Okay, now I'd like to move to organization and structure right here. Organization and structure, I find students who really focus on this tend to generalize good things to other areas. So we'll first start with the introduction. So I say introduction previews major points and possesses a strong thesis. One of the things I'm really going to be looking for is a strong introduction and the flow of your paper. Your introduction should preview your major points. So if we look at this paper done by a student last semester, this was a very, very good paper. This is the end of her introduction, the beginning of her paper. The end of her introduction says, this paper will discuss what is known about the idea of emotional intelligence, as well as looking at studies that show links between emotional intelligence and other traits, positive and negative in people. If emotional intelligence is accepted as a valid concept, is the way emotional intelligence currently assessed the best way to measure emotional intelligence? The old adage is often repeated that everyone should be in touch with their emotions. Does being in touch with their emotions and recognizing those emotions and emotional cues in other people have any bearing on the person themselves? Now, yes, there's some awkward sentences in there, some things that this student could have reworked, and I think I did give her some feedback on that. However, after I read her introduction here, I knew exactly what the paper was going to be about. And if you were to read her whole paper, which I encourage you to do because it is in Module 6, you will see that it flows from point to point and it's very strong. This was actually just an 8-page paper, but it was done very, very well. Okay, so I had a professor who once told me that good writing feels like you're reading nothing. That means that the building of the paper from sentence to paragraph is so smooth that the reader inherently understands it. If you're reading a paragraph to yourself of your own paper and you're just like, you have to freeze up or you have to think about it, it certainly means the reader will have to do that. So how do we help that? And I used to roll my eyes at this too, guys, when I was a student, and teachers or professors would tell me to do this. But having someone else read your paper is an invaluable tool. Also, putting it down for a day or so after you write it, and then going back, even a couple hours later, will give you better perspective. Reading it aloud helps a lot. It helps you stay focused. It helps you pick up simple errors that you can fix. So, we're really going to be looking for that organization and that flow from point to point. At no point in the paper when I'm reading it should I be asking myself, why am I reading about this? It should make sense. Okay, those are some big pieces. Now, ability to analyze the literature. Excellence at analyzing different perspectives while basing conclusions on theory. Okay, so that means this. Your opinions need to be based on your research. So, what happens a lot is that people will present some good research and then they go into a monologue about what they think, just what their experience is and what they think. Please keep in mind this is not a journal or a reflective piece. This is based on research, and what you guys may have picked up on from this class or from other experiences, the real art in analytical writing or APA writing, scientific writing, is being able to convey your opinion and persuade a reader by using the research. So you use the research to persuade the reader. That does not mean that you don't talk about different viewpoints. It just means that you think about how you're going to set up your points. Think about how you're going to convey them to subtly but surely convey your opinion. So let me give you a quick example. There is a big difference if your topic is, does Facebook promote narcissism, yes or no? There's a big difference between saying, well, my friends on Facebook are very narcissistic because they make posts about themselves all the time and post selfies all the time. Clearly, that is not scientific writing, and anyone reading that is going to go, well, that's your opinion with your friends in a very small subsection of the whole population. But if you use a lot of good research about what narcissism actually is, um, different measures of narcissism, how Facebook may promote narcissism, different experiments that have been done, all of that can create a really good picture. So please keep that in mind for analytical writing. And that's one of the hardest things to do, I think, in this class because the subjects are so emotionally charged. You have some really emotionally charged subjects out there that you may feel very passionate about, but you gotta rely on the research. Now, when you rely on research, it means you have to cite it. One of the big things I find in first drafts, especially, that students really seem to struggle with. I struggled with it too when I first started writing an APA, right, an APA style a long time ago, is citations. Cite, cite, cite. I encourage you to cite early and often. Err on the side of safety for the first draft. I will tell you if you've cited too much or too often, and then you can peel back. Okay, what I recommend is that you cite early in the paragraph, and then you don't have to cite for the rest of the paragraph if it's clearly the same idea. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Let me just look and if I can find an example in this paper for you guys. So let's see, that may be an example. This looks like an example right here. So in 2012, neuroscientists, she didn't have to use the first names here. She could have just said Barbie, Kalam, and Grafman 2012 conducted a study. But then you'll see she then talks about the study for a little while. You don't have to cite it every single time. She cited it again down here, which is fine. But you don't have to cite it every single sentence. I just need to know what's going on there. If you cite it at the end, then I'm reading this whole paragraph without knowing the research citation, and then I'm confused. And that's how APA writing works. So cite early and often, and that way the reader will know what research you're basing your writing on. Now, something really important with that is um, the reason why we do that is because if I'm reading a paper, I want to know what authors you're talking about. So that way I can go look them up if I'm interested. And if you do that early, I'll know who you're talking about. Now, citation, very important. Now we have peer-reviewed references right here. This is very important right here, guys. All references are peer-reviewed and cited properly in the reference list. Now, on top of that, all your references need to be used in your paper. All your references need to be used in your paper. So anything in your reference list needs to be cited. So there should be an in-text citation, and anything that's cited in your paper should be referenced in your reference list. So this is not my rule. This is a classic APA rule. So what I do not like to see, and I will certainly notice, is if you have 10 references on your reference list and you only use 4 or 5 throughout the paper. Your paper is going to be lopsided, it's going to be unbalanced, it's going to be talking about the same issue again and again and again, and it's going to be very apparent. That happens to probably about 2 or 3 students a semester, so please be careful of that. Um, okay, guys, those are some of the big areas. I'm really trying to rack my brain for other things. I think most of the other things are pretty self-explanatory. Grammar, of course, need to have sharp grammar. Um, let's see. Integrating findings. That is one thing that I want to touch on. So, what is not good writing, or what comes off as choppy, is if you simply march from one study to the next. So I've seen papers where students go, um, summarize one study, then summarize the next study in the next paragraph, then summarize the next study in the next paragraph. In your outlines, that's kind of what you were almost asked to do, but in the actual practice of writing a paper, you want to integrate your points. So you want to, maybe you talk about neuroimaging in one paragraph, then 3 paragraphs later, when you're talking about an environmental cause of something, you refer back to the neuroimaging and how different it is or how it's similar. You need to integrate your points. This makes your paper much stronger. It shows a much stronger mastery over your material. And then in your conclusion should not introduce new information, but just reinforce your main points, wrap it all up, and give the reader a sense of closure to your topic and what you have come to a conclusion on with your topic. So I'm going to be looking for a very strong conclusion as well that summarizes all of your major points, wraps it up nicely so the reader understands. Okay, guys, I think that is really all I have. We've gone over some pretty big things in a short amount of time. I just wanted to make a short video here overviewing this. I hope that all helped. Please email me with any questions you have about any piece of this rubric here. Okay, just so you know, I do grade the first drafts pretty hard. Um, we've had a lot of assignments where if you guys have been meeting those benchmarks, and you guys have been getting, for the most part, really good grades. I do grade the first assignment pretty hard, this first draft and final draft pretty hard. I give you a lot of feedback. I'm going to grade each individual paper by opening it up, going through it, making lots of comments in the margins here, like I did with this girl. This this student's paper was very, very good, so I didn't have many comments in the margins. I think this was her final draft too, so there's really not that many comments in the margins. But for some of your papers, I may have 3 or 4 comments a page and things highlighted. I'll also make some edits, and then of course I'll fill out this rubric as well with some different feedback. So you're going to get a lot of feedback. That's the best way to learn writing. I remember my freshman year of college, I had a professor who allowed me to turn in a paper as many times as I wanted until I got the grade that I wanted. It was a philosophy class, and I turned in that paper, I believe, 5 or 6 times before I got an A on it. And each time he just found something that could really elevate my paper. And I remember that to this day because he was very patient, gave a lot of good feedback, but made me really work for it and made me see a lot of things. So I'm going to try to give you guys a lot of good feedback on it, and I expect the same amount of work on your end. So happy 4th of July weekend, and I hope you guys have a good next couple of weeks.